because you've hit on something that I think is important for us to clarify for the public here. And I mean, this has been, I think, a remarkably successful enterprise in a lot of ways, but I just want to make sure that we're not creating expectations about what these folks are telling us. I've sat down, I've read all of them now, and first of all, I think the first thing that needs to be said is thank you. These are big companies that do a lot of work, and they have spent a lot of time. You know, there are a couple, some of them fall in the category of, hey, we provide these kinds of services, you know, signaling, track stuff. We've got a great track record around the world, and, you know, you should bring us into your project, which is that, and that's perfectly fine. But, I mean, a lot of people have put a lot of thought into this and coming back and saying to us, you know, answering some questions that are really going to be important questions as we go forward of how we organize this, how we break this into pieces, what things we accumulate into a single procurement, and what things we keep outside of that. And there are different strategies there that could lead us to either have more competition or less competition, depending. I mean, it's a balance. If you make really big contracts, you can, and you hand it to somebody to manage, you reduce your risk of integration between all the different components. On the other hand, you may limit yourself to just one or two big global players or teams. And so this is a balance that we're going to have to strike as we look at the best way to deliver the project physically. So I would say the first aspect of this is that we've gotten a tremendous amount of thinking from the best people in the world as to how a project like this should be phased and sequenced and delivered in the most efficient and effective way. And that's going to be very, very good. And as the staff goes through their one-on-ones, they're going to have an opportunity to further explore that. Then you get to the people who say that there are these techniques of public-private partnerships where somebody will front the money and will essentially take a responsibility to have the risk shifted from us to them to actually design, build, finance, operate, maintain, and through the entire operation of the system. And this has been done successfully in Europe, much less so in the United States for a lot of reasons. I mean, I've been involved in this kind of area for about 10 years of my professional life. And people are coming to us saying, this is the model that has worked other places, and you could do this here. But that model, we need to understand, is a financing model. It's not a funding model. It's basically taking resources we have now from cap and trade and saying, if we want to commit those to somebody in the form of what's called an availability payment, that they can, you know, deliver that part of the project. And they're telling us how big that could be, what the market can support, and so forth. The problem that I have is that in a lot of the political dialogue, and you know this better than anybody sitting at this table, people tend to garble up what they mean when they talk about the private sector coming in. Private sector was always going to be part of high-speed rail, either in a traditional procurement or through one of these alternative means like a public-private partnership. But when people who say that talk about the private sector, what they're really talking about is who's going to bring new money. I mean, we've got, as Jeff went through, we've got the bond money, we've got the federal money, we've got the cap and trade money. All those things together are not enough to build a $68 billion system. So we need that other piece of money that is new money. And that comes, where does that new money come from? In large measure, it comes from the ridership revenues that are going to be generated. How do you tap that? Well, this is the issue, is when you talk to these folks, the only way you tap that at this point, and this is something I learned about 5 minutes after meeting Mike Rossi 4 years ago, is that the only way you do that is one of two ways. Either you give them a guarantee, or they see enough ridership history that they're willing to take that risk. And we're not there yet. And what I'm seeing from these proposals does not put us there yet in terms of a revenue concession model that adds $20 billion of new money that we've estimated could be supported from the projected revenues of this project. We're getting in that direction, but we're not there. So I just want to be careful, because when people start to sit down and look at these, what they're going to see is a tremendous response, a tremendous amount of innovation, but also an honest assessment on the part of these global players that, you know, guys, you're going to need to either have some backstop for us, which frankly, we're legally limited from doing under the provisions of the Bond Act, or we're going to have to see enough ridership history that we can then be comfortable moving forward. So it is a step. I just don't want to get too far out ahead of ourselves in what we're telling the public and ourselves is going to be inherent in these responses, at least as I've read them. It still gives us a great basis for conversation and discussion. But Mike, I don't know if you want to add anything to this, because I mean, this is something that you've been very clear on since the beginning. It's been very helpful for me to understand it from a financing and standpoint and funding.